Welcome this evening or daytime, depending on where you are, to our webinar. This is the webinar on medical research, finding reviews. I'm Erin Gold-Branson. I am one of your College of Health Sciences librarians. And joining me is the wonderful Julie James. She's your Health Sciences librarian and nursing liaison. So we're glad you're here. We do have quite a bit to cover, so I'm going to turn off my webcam. We like to just start and let you know that we're real people, but it is a little distracting, so I'm going to turn that off now, and we will get into our content. All right, so here's our agenda tonight. We are only looking at a few different types of reviews, how to find each one tonight. All reviews in medical research have some common elements. They provide evidence, usually for a clinical question, and they all have a different method of searching and assimilating information. So a review is a secondary source. That is a question we get a lot. Is this a primary source? No. If it's a review, it's just like if you wrote a literature review, say. The name review is in literature review also. The word is in the name. And it's the same thing. It's secondary. It's someone else who has gone and looked for research studies and drawn together all these different research studies and reviewed them in some way. And so we'll see different ways that that happens in these different types of reviews that we're going to show you how to find. Sometimes there's analysis of statistical analysis going on, and sometimes there's qualitative analysis going on. So we'll look at these different types of reviews, and I'm going to show you the four that we're going to look at tonight. How to find review articles. Julie's going to show us that, just the general review articles. Then Julie's going to show you how to find a special type of review article called a systematic review that you might already be familiar with. Then I'm going to show you how to find specifically reviews that are considered meta-analyses, or reviews that contain a meta-analysis. That's getting into the data being compiled and analyzed in some way. And then I'm going to round out this webinar with showing you how to find integrative reviews. And we'll talk about what that means when we get to it. So some key databases that we're going to be demonstrating are Medline, CINAHL, Cochrane, and we might just mention Joanna Briggs. You've got the links there in the PowerPoint, which is why it is nice to download that if you're here live, so you get those links. But we'll also show you how to get to these databases at the end. I'll show you where you can go to access all of them on your own, straight from the library homepage. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie now, and she's going to show you how, she's going to talk about and explain review articles and show you how to start finding them.
All right, let me show my screen here, and I was going to talk about the review articles. And like Erin was saying, there's all types of review articles. You find them in almost every subject area, but medical review articles can be a little bit different. Review articles are evaluating someone else's work. And so the first question that we have to point out to y'all is that it is not to be confused with peer-reviewed journals, because a lot of people get those two things mixed up, because a peer-reviewed journal goes through a committee process to get a peer review, as a review article can be done by an individual. Okay, it will summarize the literature on a topic. It will tell you, when this particular issue emerged, the etiology of it, and it will give you a little bit of kind of a current events overview of how that particular issue is going. And then you can, they will summarize it for you and give you the big players in the arena, the people, the seminal articles, and the influencers that are going to be part of your the literature review for that particular topic. So it can be really helpful if you're doing a literature review for your own capstone or dissertation project to look at these review articles to follow the threads to other articles. And so we wanted to show you how to find them. And some of the best ways to find them are in Medline and CINAHL because they are made for this sort of thing. So let's go to the library homepage. You can go to library.waldenu.edu. You don't have to go through the portal. And then this is how you get to the health sciences page from select a subject, health sciences or nursing. And they have many of the same things. But under evidence-based and clinical resources, we've got all the ones that we're talking about here tonight. And let's start with CINAHL, since that's the one that nursing students tend to use the most. And so this looks exactly like we've seen it 400 million times. So we're going to put in a topic here at the top. And then we're going to scroll down to the publication types. And in CINAHL, it's over here on the right hand of the column. And you can see there's all kinds of different publication types in here. And then if you just scroll down, you can find review as one. And then that's going to limit your results to review articles. Theoretically, it's not 100% perfect, but let's look and see what we've got here. So 3,960 articles, and that's going to have a number of different types of reviews in there. Review is kind of a big area of this. It includes many different types of reviews in it. So the limiter, if you are searching in Medline, is a little bit different. It's in a little bit different place than in CINAHL. And I have been struck on how different the results can be between Medline and CINAHL recently. If you scroll down to the limiters here, the publication type is on the left. And if you hit an R, it'll take you straight to the R's, and you can go through till you get to the review, unless you go right past it. And then go back up to the search and get that way. So that's a really easy way to do a limit to a review article. Frequently you will see the word review in the title, but not always. So it just depends on how they're writing it and how they're presenting it and what journal they're presenting it into. So review articles can be just one person talking about one article, or it can be a survey of a whole bunch of different articles. They tend to be focused on a subset of studies and not one particular topic done broadly, but a narrower topic that they can become an expert on themselves. Okay, so we were talking about general review articles, but now if we go to the systematic reviews over here, they will quite clearly address a clinical question, and it starts with a clinical question. Your PICO question is pretty much exactly how they're going to start a systematic review, is really refine that question until it is exactly what they're looking for. And it's prescribed how these things are done. It's not something you can do off the top of your head. I frequently used to have a medical student that would tell me that they were going to do a systematic review for their project at the end of term. And it is not something you can do in one term, and frequently not even in 1 year. A systematic review has to be absolutely thorough so that you are finding every bit of literature published on that particular topic, and some things not published. The systematic review can include the meta-analyses that Aaron's going to show you in a little bit, but it's not necessarily part of a systematic review. That would be a more recent development. Systematic reviews have been around for about 20 years, but they're starting to get much more prevalent, and as evidence-based medicine is really becoming prominent, they are very, very important. They are based on quantitative research usually. You can get some qualitative aspects to it. And then there's the same set of databases we were looking at earlier. The Cochrane and Joanna Briggs are not entirely, but a lot of that is systematic reviews. And then Medline and CINAHL just have some in there. I put this citation on the bottom about what is a systematic review, just because it's a great article from PubMed Health about distinguishing and the steps involved in in creating a systematic review and going through all of the requirements for that. So the elements here were described by Deborah Cook in 1997, and that defined clinical question, that PICO question, is, you know, number one. The pre-specified inclusion and exclusion criteria would be for a particular population, a particular geographical area, or possibly a particular type of the disease in question. So they need to say, we are going to include this kind of patient and not that kind of patient. And they need to think all that out ahead of time. They do have to formulate some very complex searches for medical evidence. And they have to have a search strategy that someone can follow up on later. It has to be reproducible, I believe is the word that they use there. And then the reliability, like evaluating the variables and the reliability of the clinical trials that they're using in the systematic review. That goes very, very deep as well. Synthesizing the data is kind of a given here, but the evidence-based conclusions, there's almost always going to be a sentence or a short paragraph on the conclusions that they're drawing from that systematic review. So, so systematic is very much a big deal, and it's a lot more complicated than a lot of people can imagine. Is that pretty much what we wanted to say about that, Erin?
Yeah, I think you hit on everything. Again, usually in a systematic review, what the authors are reviewing systematically are randomized controlled trials. So they're pulling all of these randomized controlled trials, which are themselves a pretty decent level of evidence. You know, they are primary sources, the randomized controlled trials. So the people who write the article are the ones who actually did the research themselves. They went and did an experiment. And then the systematic review is looking at a whole bunch of experiments. So you can see how that raises the level of evidence. Now we're not just looking at talking about one experiment we did, but if I'm writing a systematic review, I'm looking at all these different experiments that lots of people have done and drawing conclusions from that. So that's why it raises the level of quality of the evidence.
And they'll try to compare these studies against each other, but frequently they don't have the same variables. So they really have to do an analysis of, you know, this study was done with this population, this was done a little bit differently, and this is how that could have affected the results. So it's a deep dive analysis, let's put it that way.
Beautiful.
Okay, onward and upward. You want to talk about meta-analyses?
Sure. Did you want to show us how to find systematic reviews first?
Oh yeah, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Let's go back to, we did start off with Medline and Cinol. And the funny thing that is weird is that Medline does not have a limiter for systematic reviews. But if you put in systematic review here in the second search box, that will pretty much do it. I've tried it with quotes around it, without quotes around it, and it does work very well either way. And you can see that all these top hits are systematic reviews. In Cinol, it does give you a systematic review limiter, but it works the same way, and it may or may not be different. I found the results to be a little bit different when I put in systematic review up here in the search box, as opposed to when I use their limiter for systematic review. So if I go back to the initial search page, the limiter is down here with the publication type. And then if I go down to systematic review and pick that, then it's going to give me a little bit different results. Not exactly, but this is the kind of thorough searching that we're talking about. When someone is doing a systematic review, they have to take into account all of these tiny little differences when searching. So it's just another way to look at that. We do have some other subjects here. We've got under the evidence base and clinical resources, the Cochrane database of systematic reviews is kind of the gold standard of what we're talking about here. It's the most expensive database, and the one that is, the most expensive one that's exclusively systematic reviews. but it also has systematic review protocols and some other things in it that will be in advance of the review being finished, because systematic review, like I said, takes a long time. So you have to have some idea of what they're doing in the meantime. But obesity here. And then most of the Cochrane reviews will be very large documents, just so you know. They do take a while to load, and you can put in more search terms here to narrow it down by your population or whichever. But systematic reviews, you can see there's not nearly as many in here. We have 100 articles that mention obesity because they are really in-depth articles. And so if you wanted to limit it further with a second search term or even a third one, you can also limit by date along the side here, the same way that we do our other EBSCO databases. Okay. How's
Perfect.
that?
Beautiful. Thank you, Julie. All right. So like Julie mentioned, because systematic reviews, they take a really long time. They are reviewing randomized controlled trials usually. There just aren't going to be that many of them, like she said. And the same is true of a meta-analysis, which is what I'm going to show you now. Let me share my screen. So we already mentioned that often systematic reviews include a meta-analysis. So that's where they're taking all that data, all those statistics that were gathered or, created really through a randomized controlled trial, taking all that data and compiling it and coming to bigger conclusions, it's exactly what the name says, a meta-analysis. So a big analysis of all the things that have already been done. And so it's just like a systematic review. Again, we usually can't be too specific with the topic that we search on because there just aren't that many meta-analyses out there because they're looking at individual studies. So if there are only, 10,000, that sounds like a lot, but let's say there are 1,000 individual experiment studies, randomized controlled trials on a topic, and then I'm doing a meta-analysis of like 500 of those or something. There might only be one meta-analysis out there on that topic. So that's a problem that students run into sometimes. They're like, well, I happened upon this systematic review for my topic that relates to it. I want to now see what else, can I find more systematic reviews? And often it's like, nope, that's the one. So you found it, good job. Or they'll have an assignment where they particularly have to find a meta-analysis or a systematic review, and they're looking on a really, really really specific topic, and it's like, well, nobody's done a meta-analysis on that very specific topic yet because there aren't enough randomized controlled trials to analyze on that topic. So we want to keep things broad is what I'm saying. See what is out there that relates to the area that you're working on and what you can glean from it. So yeah, that's a meta-analysis. I'm just going to go over to Medline and CINAHL and show you how to specifically search for them. Like I said, sometimes students happen upon them. They're like, oh, this is really useful. Yes, a meta-analysis is really useful because then you might go and look at some of the individual randomized control trials that they analyzed in the meta-analysis yourself. That can lead you to some other sources if you want to just look at primary sources, or it can give you a good overview. All these reviews that we're talking about, obviously, in academia, they're useful in one way, and then in like practicality, from a clinician's view, they're useful in a totally different way when you need to make a decision about a treatment plan or, a diagnostic issue. A systematic review can just save you a lot of time. You don't have time to go look for all this evidence and compile it all yourself. So you read a systematic review to find out like what's the latest evidence on how do I make these decisions as a clinician. So different uses depending on the context. But I'm going to do a very broad topic still here of lung cancer. I'm in CINAHL. And I'll show again how how to get into these databases at the end. I'm just going to start with my broad topic of lung cancer. And I'm going to scroll down in CINAHL, and it's just like we've seen already. I'm going to go to the publication type box and scroll through. They're in alphabetical order, which I'm so glad they are because I would go past it every time. And I'm going to click on meta-analysis. Pretty self-explanatory, but it is there. Some people just don't even know that it's there, and you can limit. Oh, and I timed out. You can limit your search just to meta-analyses if that's what you want. Let me reopen these because I had them sitting open for too long. We'll do that again. Now you get to see it again. Lung cancer in the top box, pretty broad. I'm being a little bit more specific than Julie's example, but this is still a really huge topic area. Lung cancer has a lot of research out there on it. And then publication type, I'm just going to scroll through and get to meta-analysis. So I'll go ahead and do this search here in CINAHL, and we're going to do the same thing in Medline. This is what Julie's already talked about, but it is really interesting for a topic to do pretty much the same exact search from one database to the next and see how different of results you get. That's a common question we get from students is, why do you have so many different databases? Well, they actually do search inside different journals. So the results I'm getting in CINAHL, even though I'm limiting to meta-analyses there, and I'm going to limit here to meta-analyses in Medline, again, under publication type, it's just in a slightly different spot in Medline, I'm still going to get incredibly different results because they are searching inside different journals, a different set of journals. So it's just different publishers of journals have agreements with different databases. Yeah, you can put my content in there, and they're not all in the same place. So I've got, let's see, in Medline, I limited to meta-analysis, I've got 1623 results. This is still pretty big. In CINAHL, I didn't get nearly as many. These may not all be relevant in Medline, but you can see here also just our point that systematic reviews often include the meta-analysis. So I know when Julie was searching for systematic reviews, I saw some that came up that had meta-analysis in their title. They often do include that in a systematic review, but not always. But it is nice that usually if you are specifically wanting to find a meta-analysis, it usually says it in the title. It will name itself as such and let you know that it's a meta-analysis. So there we go. Again, it was just that publication type that we chose meta-analysis under here in Medline. And it's just in a slightly different spot in Medline than it is in CINAHL. Okay, I'm just showing you this again. It's a lot of the same. All right, so let me go back up to the top here in both of these. And now the last review type that I'm going to talk about and I'm going to show you how to find are called integrative reviews. And it, again, I love it when people name things in a way that makes so much sense because it's an integrative review. It's integrating qualitative and quantitative evidence. So that's what we're integrating. That's the integration in integrative reviews. It's similar to a systematic review, but it adds in all these qualitative studies. They are becoming more common. Integrative reviews are a little more new. They're not that new anymore, really, but they are still kind of becoming more prevalent. They're still up and coming. So unfortunately, because they are still on the upswing in how people see them as being very useful, there is no way to limit to integrative reviews in either Medline or CINAHL. We don't have a nice little checkbox or a publication type for integrative reviews. But similar to what we saw when Julie looked for systematic reviews in Medline, we can just type in integrative review as a keyword. So I will show you how to do that. But again, just if you're what's an integrative review? I'm going to show you something in a minute that will answer that if you forget. But for now, I'll let you know again. I'll just repeat that they are like a systematic review, but they're adding in qualitative studies. So they're integrating qualitative and quantitative. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me that that would be even harder to do than a systematic review, because then not only are you looking at all these different studies, all these different experiments, and then non-experiments, all these different qualitative studies with different variables, but then you're trying to come to these conclusions to provide evidence where you're not even just looking at data or statistics from experiments, you're also then trying to integrate in what people have learned through all these qualitative studies. It just seems really difficult. I don't think I will ever write one. Okay, but let's see how we can find them if we want to. I'm going to stick with lung cancer, and then I'm just going to type in integrative review. And I do suggest putting the quotes around that phrase so it glues them together. It has to be integrative review that it finds. And then I'm going to just click search here in Medline, and I'm going to go over to CINAHL and do the same thing so we can see the difference. And in Medline, let's see, I got one integrative review about lung cancer. Again, they're still becoming more common. They're not that common yet. And I think probably because they are really, really difficult to do. So, and then over here in CINAHL, wow, I got two. So what this tells me is that this is too specific of a topic. I'm just not getting much on lung cancer specifically when I look for integrative reviews. There may not be an integrative review on whatever topic you are researching or interested in. So that's okay. You're not doing anything wrong with your search. You just have a topic where nobody's taken the time and effort to do an integrative review yet. So I do have two though. And you probably would still want to make sure that they really are integrative reviews, because there's no special limiter where the database says, yes, for sure, this is a systematic review with that limiter, or a meta-analysis. Yep, it's got the meta-analysis publication type on it. Well, we don't have that with integrative review. So what I would probably want to do is at least click on the title, or you can use this little page with the magnifying glass over here on the right when you're looking at your results, and it will give me the abstract that I can just skim through and see, make sure that it says it's an integrative review. And this one does. This article is an integrative review. Look at that. I love it when they make it so blunt and obvious. Usually they will do that. So I can be assured now this is an integrative review if that's what I'm looking for and what I want to find. So that's finding integrative reviews. Now, before we end the recording and before we take questions, I did want to show you one more time how to get to the nursing research home, which is where we've accessed all of these databases. And then I also want to show you a very special research guide. It's kind of, you can think of it almost like a toolkit for finding evidence-based practice research. I'm going to show you how to get to that because it covers some of the things we've talked about. It definitely covers systematic reviews and how to find them. And it also gives some help with these specific databases. And also one that we don't really have time to show tonight called Joanna Briggs. So I'm just going to show you how to get to those things, and then another place you can go for help, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'm back on the library homepage. I'm going to subject resources, just like Julie did at the beginning. Just nice to give a recap. Clicking on select a subject, and then go to nursing to get to all the things I'm going to show you. We're going to click on nursing. I'll just open it up over here. Here's this nursing research homepage. And if you want to just get straight to those databases we've used this evening or today, you would click on evidence-based and clinical resources, and they're all there. There's Cochrane, there's Joanna Briggs. I'm going to show you where you can see some help on that. And here is CINAHL, and Medline and some other clinical evidence-based research databases. So if you keep scrolling down, I'm just gonna make this go back up by clicking on it again, the evidence-based and clinical resources. If you keep scrolling down on the nursing page, look at this, we've got research help. Please scroll down. We know that people don't scroll down on these pages, and what you'll find under research help are these guides, or like you can think of them as toolkits that librarians have made specifically for you, Walden students, and they walk you through a variety of topics or things that you are going to need to do in your time as a Walden student. So under research help, I'm going to click on evidence-based research, this little option, evidence-based practice research. First, we have our beautiful definition of what evidence-based medicine is, and then a little description, and these are the guides that I'm talking about. We have this evidence-based practice research guide. This walks you through how to find different levels of evidence. So it's, if you think about it, it's how to find different qualities of these different levels of evidence quality. That's how you want to think of it. And this guide has so much on it. It explains what evidence-based practice research is. It talks about different levels of quality of evidence. It even talks about how you build a clinical question. But over here on the left, I want to point out we do have specific help for these different databases. We've shown you CINAHL and Medline. It's just a nice little place to get the reminder of there's a checkbox for this, or I can select the publication type for that, and I can't for this other type. So it just goes over how you can limit your searches in these different databases. And the one that we didn't show you, Joanna Briggs, I'm going to click on that. This is just a nice little overview of how to use the Joanna Briggs database. It can be really helpful if you are trying to find a systematic review on a topic and you're not finding anything in CINAHL or Medline. You go to Cochrane, there's no Cochrane systematic review for it. Then Joanna Briggs can sometimes save the day and come through for you, and maybe there is a systematic review in there. So this shows you how to set up a search, how to use the search screen. It is very different. I'm not gonna lie, it's the most unuser-friendly database I've ever seen. So it can be helpful though when you're not finding things in other places, and sometimes you have to use it. But this guide shows you how to limit to systematic reviews in there, and then how to find evidence summaries and how to find full text, because it's hidden. The PDF full text links are hidden in Joanna Briggs. So you can explore that, and that's always a great thing to send through our Ask a Librarian forum if you need help using any of these specific databases that we've shown you tonight. So I want to highlight that as well. I'm just going to go back to the library homepage and remind you that we do have our Ask a Librarian service up in the top right corner, where you can contact the library with questions about anything that we're showing you tonight or things that we are not doing tonight. So if you have those other questions, you can send them through our Ask a Librarian form. And the last thing I want to point out before we end the recording and open up our question time is this search everything on the library homepage. When I click search everything, this is going to let me see help that we have in the library, like those guides, but also things that we call quick answers. And those are really our most frequently asked questions. And guess what? If you can't remember what's the difference between a systematic review and an integrative review, if I just start typing that in, systematic review and integrative review, you're like, I know I don't remember what she said the difference was. I feel like I should know that, or I'm being asked to do something with this in a course. Make sure you have this selected on search everything first of all, so that it will search all of our help that we have in the library. And then if I just click search over here, okay, I get in the middle those quick answers, and look at that. what is the difference between a systematic review and an integrative review? We didn't have these quick answers forever. They've been around for several years now, but these quick answers are just so lovely. If you can't remember what a systematic review is, if you can't remember how to find an integrative review article, we have all of this, pretty much everything we've shown you and talked about tonight is answered in a quick answer. So you can always go back and do that kind of search on the homepage, make sure it's set on search everything. And I just want to show you one of these quick answers really quickly. It really fully answers the question, and then it links you to other quick answers for more information. So if, let's say I did want to remember how do I find a systematic review, I'm going to click on that one. Look, it doesn't even just give me like one line answer. It links me into all this different help. It shows me how to limit incidental to systematic reviews. It's so, so helpful. So use our quick answers because we've put a lot of effort into them and they are very helpful in my opinion. So again, to get to those quick answers, our frequently asked questions, starting on the library homepage, you do have to click on search everything because you want to find our library skills guides, our quick answers, everything. You want to search across all that we have. And so you're going to then just type in your question or just the topic of your question. So let's say I don't know what's a meta-analysis. I could just type in meta-analysis and see what quick answers. There it is. How do I find a meta-analysis research article? And if you can't get a full answer to what you need, then please do use our Ask a Librarian service. All right, so I am going to make sure we've covered everything. Yes, we have. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now, and then we can open up the rest of our time to questions. Thank you, everyone. Before I stop the recording, thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. And remember that you will get a recording in a few hours after.